Good morning. We're so thrilled to welcome you to this year's annual Religious Freedom Annual Review, sponsored by the International Center for Law and Religion Studies. I'm Elizabeth Clark. I'm the program chair, and you have a wonderful treat ahead of you today. For over 10 years, this conference has been bringing together academics, religious leaders, pundits, media, civil society, to talk about the role of religion in society and the importance of religious freedom. We're going to, as an initial matter, we're going to invite Shira Hoffer, the Executive Director of the Institute for Multipartisan Education, to offer an opening prayer or blessing for us. Thank you.
Good morning. I was honored and a bit surprised when Professor Clark asked me because I'm Jewish, and this isn't quite our thing. But I'm inspired by your tradition of it and wanted to share a few words. So in Judaism, we have a plethora of blessings that we can say at multiple points. We have a specific one if you see a rainbow or you smell a nice flower, for example. But there's one that we say when we happen upon instances of great beauty and excitement, and that comes from Psalm 118. We say, Hodu ladonai ki tov, ki leolam chasto, which means blessed, or we give thanks to God for his greatness is everlasting. So I wanted to share those words and to say that as somebody who works in the dialogue space, I'm hoping that you feel uncomfortable at some point during this conference and that you meet somebody who you really disagree with. And that in that moment, when you feel uncomfortable, we can rely on some of the words from the same psalm. It says, Min hametzar karati ya, anani b'merchav ya, Hashem li lo yira ma ya'aseh li adam, ozi v'zimrat ya v'yehi li Yeshua. Which means, from the depths I called to you, God, and you answered me with a great expanse. God is here for me, and I will not be afraid, because what can man do to me? God is my strength, and he will be for me a redemption. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. We'd like to begin with a few words of welcome. We'd like to recognize Brett Scharffs, the director of the International Center for Law and Religion Studies and the Rexy Lee Chair and Professor of Law, and President Shane Reese, who's president of Brigham Young University. And we'll go to that point.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you to all who've come to participate, to speak, and thanks to all who have come to listen and to participate. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of all of the things going on around us and the challenges facing us in the world today. Here in the United States, which is the focus of our conference, we live in a time of tremendous division. In particular, we live at a time when manifestations of anti-Semitism are at levels that we have not seen in the United States in many, many decades. There are other forms of hatred that are prevalent and seem to be on the rise. Just this past weekend in Utah, we saw two shootings, one at a community festival and another at a political protest. Around us, we see people struggling, some right now and some in very significant ways. Two of the primary political emotions that seem prevalent are anger and fear. Lately, we have learned a lot about what does not work. We have learned that sarcasm does not work. Anyone who knew me as a 15-year-old knows that that is something you can master at a very young age. And it doesn't work. We've learned that aggression doesn't work. Separation doesn't work. Vilification doesn't work. Finger pointing doesn't work. Vilification, throwing bricks, doesn't work. Many of us are seeking to find a path to a better way. And for many of us, we find that in our faith traditions. We find that better way in our religious communities. For those of us who are Latter-day Saints, there are two things in particular that we have been thinking about recently that relate to the themes of this conference. The first is the call from the president of our church, our prophet, President Russell M. Nelson, and his call to all of us to be peacemakers. This has been a repeated theme of his time as president of the church, and it is one of the themes of our conference today. We're grateful to all of those who've come to speak with us and share their expertise about how we can implement in practical ways the skills, and not just the skills, but the habits of the heart, the traits of character that will help us become peacemakers in our own hearts, in our homes, in our communities, and beyond. The second theme has to do with human flourishing. This is not a term that we tend to use in Latter-day Saint terminology, but it's a very important one. In Latter-day Saint terminology, we tend to use something more akin to building covenant communities. For Latter-day Saints, we live in an era of unprecedented temple building. Just last week, President Nelson dedicated in Syracuse, Utah, the 206th temple in the church. When President Nelson was born, there were 6 temples in the church. That was 100 years ago. Today, 206, with another 200 announced or planned. Why do we live in an era of such unprecedented temple building? Well, temples are places where Latter-day Saints make sacred covenants. I would suggest that these create relationships, vertical relationships and horizontal relationships. The vertical relationships, of course, are between us as individuals and with God. But also important are the horizontal relationships that are created, one with another. The temple covenants involve promises involving obedience, fidelity, love, and service. When we create covenant communities gathered around these temples, we are creating communities with enough people to run and provide service in those temples, people who are committed to living lives of fidelity, love, and service. And so these become communities where human flourishing is possible, where we can live in horizontal communities of love and service, as well as vertical communities of commitment to God. And so, if we've learned much about what does not work, what does work? I think it's quite simple. What works? Love works. But here's the thing. Love is really hard work. Being patient is hard. Ask any parent. Avoiding envy is hard. Ask anyone with a super successful sibling. Being kind is hard. Ask any clerk. Being humble, slow to anger, not keeping score of wrongs, finding no joy in wrongdoing, maintaining hope, persevering in difficult times. These things are hard. Of course, here I'm simply riffing on Corinthians 13, 4 through 5, and Paul's majestic meditation on the meaning and the taxing demands of love. Yes, love works, and love is real hard work. And that, I believe, is why we are here. Religious freedom matters because love matters. We stand up for the religious freedom of others because we love them. Full stop. We are here to learn how to be more informed and more effective advocates and builders of religious freedom for all people in all places, and of human dignity for everyone everywhere. But the reason we are here is because love works, and love takes work. Welcome.
Welcome to Brigham Young University. I will just say that I walked up to the stage this morning and saw Elizabeth Clark, and I said, Elizabeth, I just want you to know that my remarks are quite short. And her face lit up. Little worried that you didn't have more disappointment on your face. I do want to welcome you to Brigham Young University today. It's a wondrous day outside. I hope as you walked in, you noticed the majesty of the mountains, the beautiful surroundings. I hope you get a chance to spend some time breathing the fresh mountain air. It is a remarkable setting for a remarkable gathering. I commend to you this theme that we are all here gathered together today to talk about. It is an incredible theme. It is a theme that is perfectly suited to be held on this campus. At Brigham Young University, we are striving in all that we do to be Christ-centered. We take our religious mission very seriously. We ask all of our faculty, all of our students, our 39,000 students who attend this university, we ask them to be bilingual. We want them to be as conversant in the disciplines they choose, which are important. We want incredible statisticians, especially incredible statisticians. We want accomplished accountants. We want engineers who can go out and build incredible, sturdy bridges for us all to drive on. We want people to produce fine arts of the most exquisite forms. So their disciplinary excellence is a vital and critical part of what happens at this university. But we ask those who come to this campus to also embrace their spiritual selves, to develop an ability to speak in the language of things spiritual, things sacred. And we believe that those two things are actually mutually reinforcing, that we won't be successful as academics in spite of our spiritual mission, but that we will be successful as academics precisely because of our spiritual mission. And it is an exciting thing, and the work that you all are here to do this week is about protecting our ability to do that. Religious freedom provides for all of us an ability to pursue those missions which are most dear and tender to us. And so we're grateful for the work you're doing. We're grateful that you're talking today about peacemaking. And I would just underscore the importance of what Brett just said about the importance of covenants in that peacemaking effort. I love what Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs had to say about covenants. He said, self-interest generates contracts. In a contract, two or more individuals, each pursuing their own advantage, come together to make an exchange for mutual benefit. I pay my garage mechanic to mend my car. I and others pay our taxes to ensure that we have the social services we need. So there is the commercial contract that creates the market and the social contract that creates the state. But in both cases, the motivating factor is self-interest. Contracts are fundamentally about I. A covenant generates a different kind of relationship altogether. Recall that what makes it different is that in a covenant, two or more individuals, each respecting the dignity and the integrity of the other, come together in a bond of love and trust to share interests, sometimes even to share their lives by pledging their faithfulness to one another to do together what neither can achieve alone. Unlike contracts which are entered into for the sake of advantage, covenants are moral commitments sustained by loyalty and fidelity. Even when they call for sacrifice, they are about you and I coming together to form a we. Close quote. That is at the core of what we mean by peacemaking. At times setting aside our own personal interests so that we might achieve a greater good. And so I commend this program that has been so carefully curated for your benefit. I also want to talk a little bit about human flourishing. One of the 3 primary initiatives I have as president when it comes to our research efforts, you see, at BYU, we still plant 1,000 flowers and see where they bloom in our academic disciplines. They bloom particularly brilliantly in places like statistics on this campus, but we do engage in the academic pursuit of our disciplines. But we also have made a decided and a specific effort to engage in research in 3 fundamental areas that we think are the core pillars for strengthening society. The first is the family. As a core unit of society, strengthening the family is an important piece of what we do at Brigham Young University. The second is the inspired Constitution, the document in the United States that protects the religious freedom that you all are here to talk about. And we feel that that's an important and an essential piece for us to support and for our young people to gain an appreciation for. And lastly, we believe that religion has the power to strengthen society. That religion is the basis of flourishing societies. So I love that your theme involves religion and human flourishing. And you might say, well, how does religion influence flourishing? It turns out that last week, I was at a gathering of presidents, over 150 presidents of faith-based institutions in the United States, convened by the American Council on Education, which candidly, until this convening, was primarily a secular-based organization. And they started looking around and tried to see which sectors of higher education were experiencing success in an era where there is a distinct lack of trust in higher education. And it turns out that the area where we've seen growth throughout the country is religiously affiliated universities. Their enrollments are growing at a time when enrollments in most institutions are falling. So you might have heard that faith-based institutions are dropping off and are failing in today's educational sector. There's nothing further from the truth. They're flourishing. And it's because, as Rabbi Ari Berman said on this campus, so many young people today are experiencing not a crisis of faith, but a crisis of meaning. They're searching for meaning. And that's what these institutions can provide. So in this area of research, one of the things that we had was, one of our speakers was Ryan Burge. I don't know how many of you follow his podcast. If you don't, I highly recommend it. He tracks faith-based communities and what they contribute to human flourishing. So it turns out that you might be interested in some of these statistics. I'm sorry, I'm going to get geeked out for a minute. But people often say, you know, if you're going to church regularly, I think that contributes to reduced mental health. Well, it turns out that if you look at the data rather than what you hear on social media and other places, the people who are feeling depressed, the group feeling the least depressed are those who attend church or attend a worship service weekly. The people who feel the least lonely in their life are those who attend church or a worship service weekly. And those who felt nervous, anxious, or on edge, who are the people who feel the least that way? Those who attend a worship service weekly. It flies in the face of what we often hear about faith-based communities. In fact, feeling not depressed, feeling not lonely, and feeling not nervous, anxious, or on edge, that the way to curb that is to attend a worship service on a regular basis. That is the story that hasn't been told. And these are data from the Pew Research Center, a secular-based institution of research. My friends, this topic is incredibly timely. Our rising generation, the young people of this country, and I would submit of this world because of this international forum, are in dire need of exactly the message that you all are studying. And so I commend the program to you, and I warmly welcome you to Brigham Young University. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you, President Reese. We'll excuse now the three of you so we can have our three speakers come to the stand. We're grateful for the support of our university president, even if he is a statistician. We'll overlook that just this once. We have three eminent speakers for you today. It's a real treat. The whole day is full of people who I'm just excited to introduce to you. We'll start today with Elder Marcus B. Nash. He needs to leave just a little bit early for some meetings in Salt Lake. Elder Nash is one of our own here. He graduated from Brigham Young University with a bachelor's degree in international relations and earned a law degree from the single most valuable law school in the world, right? Elder Nash was a partner in a major Seattle law firm at the time of his call to serve as a member of the 70 in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As a 70, he has served as president of the South America West area, South America Northwest, Africa West area, an assistant to the executive director in church history and correlation departments, executive director of the Boundary and Leadership Change Committee. He served as executive director of the missionary department. Now, Elder Nash is one of the 7 presidents of the 70, which is an enormous administrative and personal load. And as part of that, he also assists the quorum of the 12 apostles in supervising various areas of the church. Grateful for his time. Go ahead and introduce the next 2 speakers so that we can just proceed from one to the next, if you don't mind. Our second speaker is Dr. Harold Koenig, who is a faculty member at Duke University Medical Center. He's a professor of psychiatry and an associate professor of medicine. He also teaches at King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, in the School of Public Health in Ningxia Medical University in Ningchuan, China, and as a visiting professor at Shiraz University of Medical Sciences in Shiraz, Iran. Dr. Koenig has given testimony before the United States Senate, the U.S. House of Representatives about the religious benefits of public health, the benefits of religion on public health, excuse me. He also led a professional training course focusing on spiritual readiness for chaplains and has trained Ukrainian military leaders on the prevention of suicide and has written on spiritual readiness for military leaders and chaplains. Our last but very certainly not least, our pride of place, we have Reverend Lawrence Edward Carter. In 1958, Martin Luther King privately recruited Lawrence Edward Carter as a 10th grader to come to Morehouse College. 21 years later, he became the first dean of the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel there. And today, he's also a tenured professor of religion, the college archivist, and a curator at Morehouse colleges. He served in many areas. He's also, as you can tell when you hear him speak, he's a licensed and ordained American Baptist minister. And we hope he'll share some of his fire with us. Dr. Carter is the recipient of, administrator of budgets, fellowships, gifts, grants, endowment, has received over 100 honors and recognitions for his work. He's the founder and sole fundraiser for the Morehouse International Hall of Honor that consists of over 200 original oil portraits of distinguished leaders in the civil human rights movement globally. My friends in the church who live near him have talked to me over and over again about the impact that they've felt being with him and learning from him. And we're grateful for his leadership there that also brought President Nelson, the president of our church, to be honored. It's a great honor for us to work with you and to have you here today. So we'll hear from the three of them, and then I'll make a brief announcement about the sessions after this. So thank you. Elder Nash. Please.
I am so happy to be here. I love this institution, and I'm grateful for the great influence it's had in my life. And I feel so honored to be on the stand with these two esteemed, I'll call them brethren. Really a blessing to be with you. Glad you're here. All right, I have a message. It's interesting. Brad, you mentioned the word flourish. Well, it's interesting that Latter-day Saints scripture promises that God's covenant people, note the word covenant there, will, in the Lord's words, flourish in the latter days. Given the abundant evidence connecting religious freedom to human flourishing, it stands to reason that this prophesied flourishing will go hand in hand with the free exercise of religion. In fact, religious freedom does more than provide an environment for human flourishing. It is a catalyst. The topic of religious freedom is personal for me. Several of my ancestors suffered for their religious beliefs. I'll talk about one today, Christian J. Larson, my third great-grandfather. He was one of the first to join the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Denmark. It was not easy in those days to be a member of the church in Denmark. They faced severe persecution, including beatings and the like. Despite the persecution, Christian's dedication to his newfound faith was unwavering. After joining proselyting efforts in his homeland, Christian was assigned by church leaders to serve a mission in Norway. The authorities in Norway were not pleased with his preaching. As a result, Christian was thrown into jail. He spent 6 months there, singing hymns with 3 other jailed missionaries to keep their spirits up. The county judge and other local officials treated him and his cellmates as if they were criminals and refused to engage in any meaningful communication with them. We do have a brief record of an interrogation of Christian during his 1852 incarceration. And I'll now share that interrogation with you. "For what purpose have you come to this country?" asked the officials. "To teach the people the true gospel of Jesus Christ," Christian said. "Would you return to Denmark if you were liberated from prison?" His response, "Not till God released me through his servants who sent me here." They pressed, "Will you refrain from preaching and baptizing?" His response, "If you or any of your priests can convince me that our doctrine and faith is not in accordance with the doctrines of Christ, for I desire to obtain salvation and to do the will of God." To which this chief interrogator responded or retorted, "We consider it beneath the dignity of our priests to argue with you. I now forbid you." to mislead any more souls by your false doctrines. End of his quote. No freedom of religion there. Instead, the state repressed the exercise of religion in favor of the state religion. Ironically, as a boomerang effect, this may have, in a way, repressed the development of the state itself. When one considers literally the thousands of Danes who emigrated to distant shores to practice their religion, we'll never know what freedom of religion at that time may have brought to those nations or that nation in terms of peace and human flourishing. Now, across the Atlantic, the United States of America was a young nation with a written constitution designed to secure the blessings of liberty for future generations. Notably, religious belief played a significant role in the creation of the U.S. Constitution. Equally important, the drafters of the Constitution recognized that the free exercise of religion was necessary to secure, I'll get rid of Christian there, to secure, not just create, but to secure and safeguard their hard-won liberty. The creation of the U.S. Constitution was, in fact, a miracle. Somehow, some way, individuals with widely divergent interests, disparate perspectives, and at times outright dislike of each other, unified to create a document setting forth the principles of a democratic republic that has endured. Now let's remember that the delegates were not pushovers. They had strong opinions and represented opinionated constituencies, some with interests and positions that clashed. Many of the delegates who came to Philadelphia had replaced the early Revolutionary War motto, "Don't tread on me." They knew how to stand independent, to fight for a cause. And against this backdrop, George Washington said, and now I quote him, "It appears to me then little short of a miracle that the delegates from so many different states, which states you know are also different from each other in their manners, circumstances, and prejudices, should unite in forming a system of national government so little liable to well-founded objections." Now, while it's impossible to precisely parse out the motivations of each delegate, we do know that all but possibly one came from a religious background. At the time of the convention, of the 55 delegates, 28 were Episcopalian, 8 Presbyterian, 7 Congregationalists, 2 Lutherans, 2 Dutch Reformed, 2 Methodists, 2 Roman Catholics, 1 unknown, and 3 deists. And I might add, 31 were attorneys. With all their differences, the delegates were unequivocally a group of men motivated and influenced by religion. And I find it fascinating that at a critical juncture, when it appeared that the then fraying, we take it for granted. I mean, this was day to day, that the then fraying Constitutional Convention was at dire risk of failing. Benjamin Franklin, who interestingly was a deist, pleaded with his fellow delegates with these words. He said, "In this situation of this assembly, groping as it were in the dark to find political truth and scarce able to distinguish it when presented to us, how's it happened, sir, that we have not hitherto once thought of humbly applying to the Father of lights to illuminate our understandings? And have we now forgotten that powerful friend? Or do we imagine we no longer need his assistance? I have lived, sir, a long time. And the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of man. I therefore beg leave to move that henceforth prayers imploring the assistance of heaven and its blessings to our deliberations be held in this assembly every morning before we proceed to business. that one or more of the clergy of this city be requested to officiate in that service. End of quote. Now, it's interesting, his motion did not carry. And as we research this, it's probably for lack of funds to hire clergy. Although correlation does not prove causation, we all understand that, it is noteworthy that soon after Franklin's impassioned plea, the delegates reached a compromise that opened the way for the convention to continue to its successful end. My point here is not to favor one religion over another, but to simply emphasize that the United States Constitution was drafted by men whose thinking, actions, words, and motives were heavily influenced by religion. Now, God wants all humankind, his children, to enjoy the blessings of liberty. I'm going to look to some Latter-day Saint scripture on this. In Latter-day Saint scripture, it says, "It is not right that any man should be in bondage to another." This applies to the abhorrent practice of slavery, as well as to individuals subject to the power of the state without representation. So, to provide liberty for his children, the Lord established, now I'm quoting scripture again, the constitution of this land by the hands of wise men whom I raised up under this very purpose. According to Latter-day Saint scripture, God raised the delegates up, as I just quoted, to create the Constitution, now I'll quote scripture again, for the rights and protection of all flesh, according to just and holy principles. Why? He answers in scripture. So, quote, that every man may act in doctrine and principle pertaining to futurity, according to the moral agency which God has given him. End of quote. Freedom is valued by God because it gives us, his children, our best opportunity to exercise our moral agency, the power to decide and to act for good. This capacity to choose good against opposition is our best opportunity to grow in character. To the degree we choose good, we can grow, in Paul's words, under the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. As President Dallin H. Oaks has stated, the most desirable condition for the exercise of that agency is maximum freedom for men and women to act according to their individual choices. Religious freedom and the free exercise of religion can move our thinking and our decision-making to a higher plane, one that can inspire one to choose to create peace and build community. Now, I find it interesting, and I love what President Reese said about the covenant and the we. Listen to this. The preamble to the United States Constitution states its lofty purpose. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish the Constitution for the United States of America. Now, it can't really be reasonably disputed that union, justice, domestic tranquility, common defense, general welfare, and liberty create an environment for human flourishing. Such an environment protects life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which the Declaration of Independence states are the unalienable rights to which each human is endowed by our Creator. I will comment on just a couple of the above stated objections of the Constitution because I think they're inextricably linked, intertwined with religious freedom. One, we the people of the United States. And two, in order to form a more perfect union. We the people. The preamble begins with the term we. The source of power and authority for government is we, the people. In other words, it was the people, not the states, who authorized this democratic republic by creating the Constitution as the system upon which our nation would be founded and function. We, the people, acknowledge that all of us, the people, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and judicial branch, are subject to the rule of law. Now, law permeates and orders society. Law is created by representatives of the people. Given that this and any free society is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, to quote Abraham Lincoln, the quality of the law and societal order depends upon the values of the people. Thus, for the good of the nation, it is vital that honest and upright values be cultivated in the minds and hearts of the people. Much depends upon the people learning to love their neighbors as themselves. Now to a more perfect union. The aim of the United States Constitution was to create a, quote, more perfect union. The Articles of Confederation, as we know, were ineffectual. With no real power given to the national government, unity was more imagined than real. No power to levy taxes, no power to form a military, no power to do just about anything, meant that instead of being United States, this group of states was devolving into fractious, competing states like Europe was at the time. The Constitution was intended and designed to provide a more perfect union, and it succeeded. Note that the word union is capitalized, as are some of the other words here. The Constitution provides not only a legal, policy, institutional, and political framework, but it also provides, to quote author Yuval Levin, a union and unity framework. In short, the Constitution demands that we, the people of the United States, work together. That is our covenant. Work together and become unified through persistently, doggedly seeking common ground. This requires that people be guided and motivated by principle, not political expediency. It requires that we understand that the practical meaning of unity in the political life of a free society is that unity does not mean thinking alike. Unity means acting together. Religious freedom is our last and our always best hope of instilling good and worthy principles into the minds and souls of we, the people. Cultivating these principles enables us to learn to differ without demonizing, to disagree without being disagreeable, to work with others with opposing views, to forge, that's a good word, to forge common ground. That suggests there's some work to be done. Small wonder, then, that religious freedom, the free exercise of religion, is the first freedom articulated in the Bill of Rights. John Adams said this: "We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Avarice, ambition, revenge, or gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." George Washington agreed. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, let's think human flourishing, religion and morality are indispensable supports. Let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion, Reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle. Freedom of religion is the first freedom, as I've stated in the Bill of Rights, because it is foundational and essential to perpetuating a free society. Religious freedom provides the moral traction a nation and its people need to flourish. Religion freely exercised is uniquely capable of turning hearts and minds to God, and thus inspiring and enlarging the human heart, mind, and soul. It has the potential to inspire us to do the unenforceable, such as fidelity, honesty, virtue, patience, service, self-sacrifice, forbearance, kindness, and respect. Hence its privileged place as the first freedom in the Bill of Rights. Now to quote Jonathan Rauch, an atheist who advocates for more religion, said he in a recent book, quote, social scientists have produced a mountain of evidence that religion is good for you. Organized religious participation correlates with greater happiness and well-being, longer life, strong immune systems, and lower blood pressure, lower crime and drug use, greater civic engagement. Most people cannot reap the same benefits at home. He continues, it is the communal forms of religious participation, rather than merely private practices, that most powerfully affect health. Other research suggests that the decline of religious participation may be an important factor in the alarming rise in the United States of deaths of despair. Because the free exercise of religion is indisputably healthy for individuals and families, for we the people, it is healthy for the nation. Nations with religious freedom are more apt to flourish as people of faith freely exercise their faith in building their nation in harmony with others. President Dallin H. Oaks said, and I quote him, speaking from a religious perspective, I affirm that followers of Christ have a duty to seek harmony and peace. We should not expect or seek total dominance for our own positions. Thus, religion supports and encourages us to work together, I'm going to use that verb again, to forge common ground, even if we must render unto Caesar, the government, the recognition of rights with which we disagree. In working to find solutions through negotiation and mutual accommodation, religion strengthens the nation and the nation strengthens religion. It is by working together that we find more durable, doable, unified solutions. And it is religious freedom that informs and inspires the human soul to make the effort and to flourish in so doing. So, what are we to do? The right of religious freedom is not something to hang on the wall as a certificate or a medal won in an athletic competition. No, the right to religious freedom, the free exercise of religion, exhorts us to live our religion. It invites us to exercise our faith in our daily living, in our homes, and to engage with others in the community, in our nation. As President Dallin H. Oaks teaches, our belief in divine inspiration gives Latter-day Saints a unique responsibility to uphold and defend the United States Constitution and principles of constitutionalism wherever we live. We should trust in the Lord and be positive about this nation's future. We must pray for the Lord to guide and bless all nations and their leaders. This is part of our article of faith. Being subject to presidents or rulers, of course, poses no obstacle to our opposing individual laws or practices. It does require that we exercise our influence civilly and peacefully within the framework of our constitutions and applicable laws. On contested issues, we should seek to moderate and unify. So, far from being bystanders, we as people of faith are to be players on the field of human endeavor. Exercising our right to the free exercise of religion invigorates both our faith and our nation. And this will happen as we, to quote President Oakes one more time, as we seek to moderate and unify. In short, we should be peacemakers. President Russell M. Nelson, president and prophet of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, observed, vulgarity, fault-finding, and evil speaking of others are all too common. Too many pundits, politicians, entertainers, and other influencers throw insults constantly. I am greatly concerned that so many people seem to believe that it is completely acceptable to condemn, malign, and vilify anyone who does not agree with them. Many seem eager to damage another's reputation with pathetic and pithy barbs. Anger never persuades. Hostility builds no one. Contention never leads to inspire solutions. He continues, true disciples of Jesus Christ are peacemakers. This means action on our part. So let's exercise our faith to interact with others in a higher, holier way, using the words of President Nelson. Now, this is not passivity. Rather, it is active engagement. He continues, now, I'm not talking about peace at any price. I'm talking about treating others in ways that are consistent with always remembering the Savior. In situations that are highly charged and filled with contention, I invite you to remember Jesus Christ. Pray to have the courage and wisdom to say or do as he would. As we follow the Prince of Peace, we will become his peacemakers. So, let's engage and interact with others as an extension of our faith, remembering President Nelson's words that the gospel net is the largest net in the world. God has invited all to come unto him, black and white, bond and free, male and female, to quote scripture from the Book of Mormon. There is room for everyone. However, he continues, there is no room for prejudice, condemnation, or contention of any kind. End of quote. Well, as I wrap this up, I want to come back to Christian J. Larson, my ancestor. He was finally released from jail after those 6 months and he returned to Denmark. But before he left Norway, he baptized a religious dissident by the name of Johan Andreas Jensen, who he had met and taught in jail. Like Christian and thousands of others, Johan emigrated to the United States, where he could freely exercise his religion, and even then it was hard. And that good man, Johan Andreas Jensen, became the great-grandfather of President Russell M. Nelson, whose teaching on being peacemakers I have quoted. President Nelson's religious teachings have helped millions of humans, literally millions of humans, to flourish, including me and my family. And millions more will flourish to the degree we take to heart his charge to be peacemakers. So my invitation today is that we actively live our faith and engage with others as peacemakers in our fractious world. As we seek to moderate and unify according to just and holy principles, we can help lift our families, our communities, and nations to a higher, better place. As we weave faith, morality, love, and fairness into the political tapestry of the nations in which we live, religion will thrive, and the people and their nations will flourish. And in so doing, we will be peacemakers. And our children and their children will live in a higher functioning world of peace and human flourishing. I conclude by simply stating, Jesus Christ lives. He is the founder of peace. He is the Prince of Peace. Whatever our religious beliefs, may we follow his example and experience peace, even in a world of tribulation. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. Wow is all I can really say. You all seem to be so incredibly blessed, but I'm coming from the outside. I'm just an academic. I'm not Mormon. I'm from a different faith tradition, so I'm really coming from the outside. I am a conservative Christian, but to listen to the speakers, just my gosh, to be able to learn under these men, it's just strikes me. So what can I contribute now to this discussion? So I hope that all of you like statistics. We've been talking about statistics here. I only have 65 slides, 20 minutes. That means 20 seconds per slide to show you. Every one is a statistical slide. So just to be aware of that, okay? So let me blast here along here. So human flourishing and pathways to it. What exactly is this thing that we've been calling human flourishing? We've heard a little bit about that from Elder Nash, about God's good in the world. In fact, that's actually how it's described in a book called The Theology of Health by Tyler Vanderweel. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then dive into the research on religious faith and human flourishing. And just recently, within the past 6 weeks, the first wave of the Global Human Flourishing Study came out. It was published in Nature. Nature is one of the top 3 science journals in the world. And there's 34 articles that report results from the first wave. And every one of those articles are looking at engagement within religious community, just exactly like Elder Nash was saying. So in any case, we'll very quickly go over that. And this is kind of an overall diagram here. So how does religious faith fit into this concept of human flourishing? So Tyler Vanderweel, the person I mentioned earlier, is an endowed professor at the Harvard School of Public Health. He is probably one of the world's top statisticians. He is the person who has developed a methodology in order to determine causal inference in longitudinal data. Okay, so he is a giant in the statistical world. And he described in an article in 2017 in the Proceedings for the National Academy of Sciences. This is the journal of the group that Congress asks whenever they have any health or science question. So he wrote this article on human flourishing, on the promotion of human flourishing. And he defined it as 6 different characteristics. There was happiness and life satisfaction, mental health, and physical health, meaning and purpose, character and virtue, close social relationships, and financial and material stability. He added that last one there because it's pretty hard to flourish when you're in a crime-infested neighborhood with drug abuse, and you're afraid you're going to be mugged, and it's hard to flourish. Not that people don't flourish in those environments. People do. And of course, that faith is a big part of that. But in any case, he added that as a component. And then he described the 4 pathways that lead to human flourishing. And he gave those 4. Family was number 1, education, work and employment, and this is where he added religious community. So let's take a look at some of the research. Now, this is the same research I will show to any of my colleagues at Duke or any place I go to speak to secular audiences. This is kind of, I've got a set of slides. It's basically the set. So this is the research that's based on an expansive review of the literature going back probably to the 1800s, looking at every single quantitative, peer-reviewed academic publication, looking at the connection between religious faith and some outcome. Here, it's depression. So for a long time, you have to understand the background. Where I came in the 1980s, I came into this, religion was seen as an obsessional neurosis. I mean, Sigmund Freud called it that. There was an obsessional neurosis of humanity, and that anybody who was religious was really, he used amentia to describe the religious person, which is related to retardation or even dementia. And so this is the environment, particularly in psychiatry, but across medicine and nursing and all of healthcare, that I was stepping into back in the 1980s when I started to get interested in this topic. Reason being because as a family physician, when I went to see patients in the hospital, I had been a nurse prior to becoming a family doctor. I was trained as a nurse to ask the person, how are you coping with your illness? So I would do that as a family doctor. How are you coping? How are you getting by? You have this heart attack, you have this stroke, you've got cancer. How are you getting by here? I just seemed to be, how can people cope, with these conditions that are threatening their life, their independence, their family? And one after another, this was south of Chicago, so this is not like in the deep south. One after another, people would say, my faith, my belief in God, my church community. People are praying for me. This is how I'm getting by. So that just struck me, and I thought, whoa. So we need to do some research because most of my colleagues here don't know about this. And when I presented it to them, they didn't like it either. It wasn't a matter of not knowing, they didn't like it. So I was kind of excluded from the group, and I felt hurt, but I was determined because I had seen something in these patients. And about the same time, I had experienced something in my own life, my own personal life, that convinced me that there was something with regard to religious faith that had to do with health and coping with stress and trauma and loss. So started to do research. Now, I wasn't the first person who had done this research. There were many prior to me, but I was one of the first that looked at the connection between religious faith and mental health within hospital settings among the medically ill. So, in any case, depression was my topic. I was studying depression in the medically ill, how you treat it, how you diagnose it, and so I also looked at religion. I wasn't necessarily, that was not supposed to be the center of what I was interested in at Duke. I was a geriatric fellow, so I was being trained in geriatric internal medicine, had a research project I had to do. So this was it, on depression, the medically ill. So I just slipped in a few questions about religion. And So in any case, based on a systematic review here many years later, 2012, looked at all of the 444 quantitative studies in the literature and found that almost 2/3 found that religious people experience, and anybody, an atheist could easily go to Medline and, Google Scholar could put in depression and put in related, got to get exactly the same finding, just have to limit it to 2010 or before. But about 2/3 found that religious people are less likely to experience depression, recover more quickly from it when they do get depressed, and of course everybody has some vulnerability to depression. And when you do a religious intervention with a depressed person, they get better. They get better with a fairly large, what we would call, effect size in terms of its clinical applicability. Okay. Now this is a more recent study. There's a Harvard School of Public Health, average age 23, okay, about 10,000 of them, and followed up for up to 6 years, and lo and behold, those young people were about 1/3 less likely to develop depression over the next 6 years based on how often they were involved in their religious community. And this is, of course, independent. If any of you know statistics, this is independent of virtually everything. 24 other covariates, other predictors, including prior church attendance. So they're even controlling for prior attendance and looking at current attendance and 6 years into the future. So about 1/3 reduction. Suicide. This is the most feared consequence of depression. About 75% of studies show that religious people have fewer suicidal thoughts, attempts, and completions. This is out of Rhode Island, Brown University, looking at a sample of over 20,000 randomly selected Americans, followed up for a period of 18 years, looking at deaths from suicide. So there couldn't be a more, spectacular study. And this is actually based on the NHANES-3, which is one of the world's top studies, multi-million-dollar NIH study, looking at cardiovascular disease outcomes. And they happened to look at religious attendance. What they found was that if people attended services twice a month or more, there was a 94% reduction in risk of dying from suicide. Here's the Nurses' Health Study. These are 90,000 women, all nurses, been followed up now for about 16 years, looking at risk of dying from suicide and finding a 7-fold greater risk of dying from suicide among those never attending services compared to women attending at least once a week or more. Now, bear in mind that there has been a rise in the suicide among women in the U.S. since 1999. And what they reported in this article was that the increase is 40% increase in risk. This is CDC data of suicide in women could be directly attributable to the reduction in religious attendance since 1999. Explaining that 40% increased risk. Now, this is looking at deaths of despair. I think that might have been mentioned. And this is deaths from drugs, alcohol, and suicide. Okay? This is in one of the world's, probably the world's top biological psychiatry journal. And you see right here a very nice 70% reduction in risk of dying from a death of despair among again, these are the nurses, 66,000 followed for 16 years, showing that effect. And among men, it's not too different either. There's a 50% reduction in risk of dying from a death of despair. And it's not only the bad stuff that's less common. The good stuff is more common. Well-being, happiness. We talked about happiness and well-being in that human flourishing slide. Remember that? Okay. So 80%. The findings are even stronger with regard to well-being. And of the 326 studies in peer-reviewed academic journals, that are typically, they don't like publishing anything on religion because these are science journals. Less than 1% found that religious people were less happy than those who were more religious people were less happy than those who were less religious. Okay. Meaning, purpose, hope, and optimism. You know, it's just, again, this is a systematic review. I'm not just cherry picking these studies. This is based on a systematic review of what's been published in the academic science literature. And if you're more hopeful, if you have purpose and meaning in life, if you're optimistic, you're just going to do better. If you get sick, if you have to go in a hospital, you have a stroke, you have a heart attack, whatever it is, you're just going to do better if you're hopeful, you have meaning and purpose, and you're optimistic about the future. What about social health? Yep, people who are more religious have more friends. That's the bottom line. And these friends stick around longer than just your typical friend, where you've got this social contract called reciprocal altruism. So you scratch my back, I scratch your back, but if you can't scratch my back anymore, that's it. I'm not scratching yours anymore. But you see, there are people who are more religious are scratching people's back long after that person has stopped being able, to a point that it's actually could be upsetting that they're scratching it so much. We had my wife was pregnant, and we had our daughter, and the daughter was hard to handle, and I was off working and, you know, doing what I do. And, you know, our church came and mowed the lawn, brought meals, you know, cleaned the house, brought so many meals. After a while, I said, stop. The refrigerator doesn't hold anything anymore. You know, the lawn was like this big. You know, we're out to the dirt almost. You know, so anyway, okay. So social support, behaviors, religious people don't use and abuse alcohol in general. Most of this research is out of young populations. Illicit drug use, it's literally the same findings, 80 to 90% of these studies. Cigarette smoking, 9 out of 10 studies show that religious people don't smoke as much. Now, will that have some health consequences? Heart disease, lung cancer, you know. Now there are these other health behaviors. Religious people are more physically active. They exercise more. Depending on your faith tradition, you know, if you're Catholic, I guess, you know, you're kneeling and standing and kneeling and standing, and you know, if you're a conservative Protestant, you know, you got your hands up and all of this, you know. If you're a Muslim, let me tell you, you're down on the ground, you know, on and off. So in any case, more exercise. But this one thing in the middle here, there is less exercise in that area, at least in terms of outside of marriage. Now, weight seems to be an issue. I'm sorry, but you know, religious people are heavier. And all of these psychological and behavioral and social benefits have consequences, and they literally affect everything about your physical body. So, immune function. I got to go faster. I think I have about 5 seconds. Do I have that? Is that 5 minute up yet? 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Okay, we're going to really move fast. So, better immune functioning. This is lower levels of inflammation in the body. This is looking at periodontitis among dentists. They have less periodontitis if they're part of a religious community. Viral load among those with HIV. They have a lower concentration of virus in the blood if they're more religious in these prospective studies. This is looking at COVID vaccination. You have a more brisk response from the vaccine if you're more religious. This is looking at hospital outcomes. Look at the mortality rate, 14% versus 1% based on religious involvement among severe COVID. Cancer. This is looking at young people. This average age 23-year-olds, you know. A lot of you are probably, you know, around that age in here or a little older. I don't know. But here there's a reduction in cancer risk by 2/3 among the more religiously active young people. This is looking at actually the genetic reason for that. We all inherit a cancer suppressor gene that suppresses the cancer, when it develops. We're all getting cancer, but we have a gene, that keeps it down. So those who are more religious have greater activity of the cancer suppressor gene. And this has been shown that. And this is 500,000 Americans. Again, you see, in particular among African Americans, you see this reduction in risk, and among women African Americans, about a 1/3 reduction in risk. This is looking at cancer mortality across the U.S. in the Nurses' Health Study. Again, you see this reduction in cancer risk, better cardiovascular systems, lower blood pressure, as was mentioned, less heart attacks. Here's the lower blood pressure one. We did this one at Duke, so this is our group. This is Harvard again, looking at the development over time of self-reported hypertension, goes down with weekly attendance. Cerebrovascular disease and stroke, down. This is looking at overall cardiovascular mortality, again down with religious attendance. If you're having open heart surgery, time to get religious, okay? Because your risk of dying in the next 6 months is 14 times greater if you're not religious, okay? Overall longevity, okay? You want to live long, be religious. Have a strong religious faith. Engage in your faith community. All-cause mortality, lower, praying, and greater longevity. Look at this. This is a national study. Those who pray every day are living longer. And those who pray for others are living even longer. So again, these are all published studies, national data. Dementia. Is anybody concerned with dementia in here? I know I am. That's all I can say. Well, low religiosity, 7 times greater risk of developing a decrease in cognitive functioning. Episodic memory, it's prayer that counts, not just staring at your navel necessarily here. Meditation doesn't seem to work this way. Physical functioning is better, and if you don't want Parkinson's disease, time to be religious as well, because there is a 7 times greater risk of developing Parkinson's disease among those who indicate that religion is not at all important. This is based on studies not only in the U.S., but in England as well. And this got a lot of, now the Global Flourishing study just came out, as I was saying earlier, $43 million study. Harvard Center for Open Science, Wave 1. It's a 5-year prospective study by the Gallup poll. They're looking at mental health, social relationships, generosity, character development, health behaviors, physical health, financial well-being. Every single one, I don't have time to go over, every single one of them found that those who are attending religious services have all of the graphs are all going just like this with religious attendance. And so in conclusion, and that I think is enough. So do we have any time for questions?
We'll save them till the end of the
Okay, we'll save them. So thank you all.
President Reese, Chair Clark, and Director Scharffs. I know I didn't get that right. Better luck the next time. And to all of the leadership of Brigham Young University and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I think I had better just dive right into this. Looking at the clock and looking at the program, I think I have just a little less time than I was told. I've altered the subject given to me from religion's role in promoting peace and human flourishing to liberal religion's positive and nonviolent role in promoting peace and human flourishing. I'm going to speak in bullets. Spiritual flourishing is the key to a humane and civilized future. Liberal religion emphasizes the coexistence of multiple religious truths, challenges the seeker to rise above those lacking in thought or intelligence or mindfulness or self-centered solutions offered as alternatives by our consumer society. Spiritual religion points the way toward aspirations, spiritual liberation, and the love of reason as the art of living. And this is why you say at BYU, intelligence is the glory of God. The role of liberal religion inspires prophetic imagination, theology's ethical edge, and moral philosophies, nonviolent, positive peace, and human flourishing. Please consider some definitions from my Introduction to Religion class at Morehouse College. Number one, religion as a means toward ultimate transformation. The key words, means toward ultimate transformation. To save time, I won't give you the sources. But Robert Cummings Neville, dear friend and teacher of mine, speaks of religion as human engagement of ultimacy. That covers atheist and theist. 3, as discussed by George David Miller, religion as the primacy of value and the sharp edge of meaning. 4, positive peace can be defined as the attitude, institutions, and structures, when strengthened, lead to a more peaceful society. Number 5, negative peace is the absence of violence and the fear of violence without justice. It simply maintains the status quo. 6, by liberal religion, I also mean an emphasis on personal interpretation and reason over strict religious doctrine, promoting individual liberty and social justice. It's a way of understanding and practicing religion that prioritizes individual experience and critical thinking, often leading to a more inclusive and progressive approach to faith. 7. Human flourishing and peace evolve from an ethos of liberal religion that advocates for a multifaceted and distinctively scriptural pluralism, offering individuals a sense of meaning, purpose, community, belonging, social engagement, and cohesion. This liberal environment shapes cultural and moral values as coherently critiqued wants. That's a short definition of values. A coherently critiqued want emphasizes worship and learning, providing a framework of options for virtue ethical cosmopolitan behavior, a source of social control and positive change, according to Jonathan Rauch. The unbroken bargain between Christianity and democracy would make reconciliation possible between Jesus, James Madison, Martin Luther King Jr., Pope John the 23rd, Dylan Oaks, Russell Nelson Sr., and Nelson Mandela. You can see I amended Jonathan Rauch's list. Number 8, prophetic religions may be defined as encouragement for the practice of a well-functioning government, a sound business environment, an equitable distribution of resources, an acceptance of the rights of others, good relations with neighbors, free-flowing information, a high level of human education, and low levels of corruption. The practice of religion should be in an affirmatorium of diversity maturity and obedience to the unenforceable. The unenforceable ethical virtues. We don't have any ethics police in the United States. The glory of Christianity, of Christianity's peace, potential, is the unifying intelligence of God. That's a short explanation for why we should worship. Peace as the integrity of right relations. That's a definition. Peace is the integrity of right relations, is still the key to repairing white Christian nationalism, which is anti-equality. White Christian nationalism's broken bargain with participatory democracy is a big issue for the church. I think I saw your hand. How many fingers was that? I only have 5 minutes.
You can take another minute or two. You go ahead and take it.
Very well. I think I should stick a commercial in here to just reinforce that last point. 356 restrictive voter suppression laws were proposed In 47 states, 79 were enacted. That's the broken bargain between Christianity, or the church, and democracy. Joseph Fletcher, who taught me ethics at Boston University, he has 6 propositions which are required to successfully relate virtue ethics and moral conduct to religious practice. Number 1, only one thing is intrinsically good, namely love. Agape, nothing else. Number 2, says Fletcher, the ultimate norm of religious decisions is love, nothing else. Number 3, love and justice are the same, for justice is love equally distributed. Martin Luther King added to Joseph Fletcher. 4, love wills the neighbor's good, whether we like them or not. 5, only the end justifies the mean, nothing else. Ends and means must be a unity to be nonviolent. The end must pre-exist. I need to rephrase that. The ends must pre-exist in the means. 6, decisions ought to be made situationally, not prescriptively. Religion's positive role helps people experience our world through a lens of value creation, bestowing love on everyone we encounter. The will to forgive and love, as Jesus said, even your enemies, affirming every person's humanity as worthy of respect. Religion's positive role is a means toward peace and unity, co-creating the beloved economic community, living the ethical meaning of the kingdom of God, teaching the sacredness of all human personality, helping all realize their greatest spiritual magnificence toward a society of dignitarians, believing all responsible labor has dignity, remembering that responsibility checks freedom. The highest level of spirituality development is sustainable cooperation. To have grace on your schedule, I'm on page 13 and there are 21 pages. I'm going to end with this. The highest level of spirituality is sustainable cooperation. We first see this in our biodata. When everything is cooperating inside of you, we have a name for that. We call it health. When everything is cooperating in society, between institutions, government, the courts, industry, education. When everything is cooperating, we have a name for that. We call it civilization. And when everything is cooperating in the cosmos, in the universe, we can experience night and day. We can experience the four seasons, and we can name the constellations. In case you missed it, what I just said to you is, we are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe. When everything is cooperating in church, making your baptism real, then you are practicing the consciousness of Christ. You are believing what Jesus said about thinking it not robbery that he should be like God. He wasn't just talking about himself, he was talking about us. And if we are living the life of God, we will experience the beloved community on earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Carter. We've been fed well this morning. At this point, we'll have a short break and then proceed to the breakout sessions. You'll see throughout the day there are different breakout sessions along 4 different tracks. One focuses on legal developments. One will focus on religion's impact in our communities. Another one will look at question of practical peacemaking. And then the last one can focus on how can I make a difference, sort of practical individual ways of changing and improving our society. After that, there will be a lunch for the speakers and invited guests. If you brought a ticket, there will be a lunch here as well. We'd invite you to offer your own or request your own blessing on your food. I think because of the comings and goings, we won't have any formal kind of introductions or comments during the lunch. But again, let me say thank you. It was such a privilege to hear from the 3 of you. You each brought so many wonderful insights and started this off so well. Please join me in offering another round of applause.